And we are live. Welcome, beautiful humans, on this beautiful Thursday evening to Pieces of Your Purpose. I am one of your co hosts, Queen, and this is
Counselor Charlie.
And thank you for joining us for our inaugural launch episode. So, our introduction episode. I'm very happy about that.
So am I.
Make sure you let us know that you're here, post your comments so that way we can go ahead and see who's in the space with us. If you're joining us later, please post your comments as well because we're going to go back and see and make whatever comments we need to make. So please make sure you go ahead and let us know that you're actually here. So Pieces of Your Purpose, sponsored by I Am Me Inc., a Delaware nonprofit focusing and supporting Delaware's LGBTQ community and allied folks for a unified community here in Delaware. And I love I Am Me Inc. So thank you, Peaches and the board, for inviting us to be part of your organization with hosting the show. All right, so I have notes as well. So we're gonna go ahead and do like follow the notes.
Okay.
So I want to kind of go ahead and talk about first. I want to give some more about IME Inc. because I think that is also important. Make sure you follow them on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Also, their website is IamMeCorp, CORP.org. You will get upcoming information about what's actually going on with events, holiday party coming up. And also another web show for allies, so heterosexual folks who are active in their advocacy and support of the LGBT community in Delaware and beyond.
Or if you know someone.
Please and thank you. So we want to thank you all for being here. So, all right, let me go ahead. I want to really give that statement, mission statement. So IME Corp was created in January 2020 to uplift and unify Delaware lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, questioning intersex, asexual, and pansexual folks and their allies by providing safe spaces, educational resources, health services, and support. The purpose will be achieved with planned events, holiday celebrations, education and networking events for LGBTQ plus folks and allies, Sunday Tea, which is coming back, the festivals, community outreach, all those things to support Delaware LGBTQ community. So thank you, IME Inc., for doing the work.
And I do think it's important just to point out that while we are planning on centering, obviously, LGBTQIA plus folks. When we use that word ally in there, for those who may not be that familiar with the term, like you may know the word, but not in the ways in which we're using the terminology, just someone who's open-minded, leaving their biases at the door, and basically coming into this space knowing that you're ready, willing, and able to learn and move forward with that learning.
Absolutely, positively. Thank you. Like, you don't just show up in word, but you actually show up in action. Allyship, we want accomplices and comrades. How about that?
And allyship is not always comfortable.
That part. So let's also talk about, let's introduce ourselves. So we gave first names.
Mm-hmm.
So Counselor Charlie, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm Counselor Charlie. For those of you that may not be familiar with me, I've been in counseling. Now, I've been counseling for about 2 years. I currently counsel with Journey Wellness and Consulting Group here in Delaware. I think that the first place that I think was most important is that for me, I'm not a monolith. So while counseling is my profession, it's my life, I love it. I more so consider me, and I know this is gonna sound funny, but a healer, someone who helps people throughout their healing process. And I think that through my 2 years of counseling, the areas that I obviously gear towards the most is LGBTQIA plus issues, life purpose, career purpose, but then you also know spirituality is a big thing for me. Absolutely. That's one of my biggest things, and that's one of the pieces that a lot of folks leave out of counseling that I feel like is necessary for most of us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's one of the things that connected us together was that spirituality piece. So I am Queen, licensed clinical social worker here in the state of Delaware, also a clinical somatic sexologist. And so pretty much that means is that the sexuality is all of who we are. And so not just a sex therapist in regards to behaviors and functionings, but understanding who we are, how we show up, how we love, how we protect ourselves and our emotions and our vulnerabilities, and our relationship to our mind, body, spirit, and energy. And so my work is really understanding that spirituality and sexuality are two sides of the same damn coin. And I wanted to be able to bring that into the healing space. And so, as a therapist, that's absolutely inviting in the relationship to spirit, little s, not necessarily big S, but also if big S shows up, like yes. And understanding that the erotic is the energy of desirability, both sexual and non-sexual. And so I wanted to be able to help people navigate sexual shame and their relationship to spirit, recovering from religious harm and things of that nature. And I also coach, right? Like erotic coaching, because feeling sexy is a measure of wellness. And so, like, not just about us feeling, and so feeling sexy is about our perspective and our relationship to ourself. And so that's what I focus on, is like our relationship to self. And so when I was invited to by IME Inc. and board to host the show, help me understand, to really talk about like all the things, right, that we really want to understand. I reached out to you and I was like, my co-therapist, you right? Like, it would be great if we do this together, like to bring our conversations here in this space and place. I was like, yes.
Especially since, you know, we bring so many different pieces. So it's like, you know, we're close in generation, but also a generation apart. So it's like, there's different perspectives. They're typically the same, you know, only because we're so aligned, but it's usually explained different. Like, you know, I always tell you that I feel like you really have the clinical aspect down pat. So when it comes to like really giving people that non-surface level knowledge, like that is your specialty area, like you excel there. And then for me, I feel like I do much better at layman's terms, like taking those big concepts and breaking them down so small. So like, and not that you, obviously, you know, you can do that too, but that's just where I feel like I shine the brightest.
Right. And so, you know, and so we are in this space, not just because professionally, like what we do, but personally, we are community, right? We are kin, and we are in our healing journey. And so when we talked about what we were going to do for the show concept with Help Me Understand, and you talked about like the fact that the career self is very much so part of the erotic self. You were in your flow and your zone. You were like, it's pieces of your purpose. And I was like, that's it.
Yes. Because I think that like,
that's it.
So it's funny. I had did a podcast like a year ago, and it was about purpose. And that's where me even saying pieces of your purpose came up, because during the podcast, I realized all the folk that I was sitting with, I realized in that moment that when we were talking about purpose, they were speaking in a linear fashion. And I was reiterating these concepts, and I was like, how can I get them to understand this? And I'm like, this is what they're not getting, because they're thinking, oh, my purpose is this. And so that means for the duration of my lifetime, this is my only purpose. No, purpose is not linear. Purpose is all over the place. Your purpose at 20 is not going to be your same purpose at 30 and at 55 and at 75. And that's not even to mention, you may have multiple purposes at once. Some of us are blessed in that way, that your calling is big. And so you're going to have multiple purposes at different points of your life. And so there's pieces to your purpose everywhere down the line. And we have to remember that it's not a straight road.
It's not.
No, there's bumps. It goes up. Sometimes it even goes backwards. Sometimes your purpose, you evolve, and then you wind up having to go back to that old purpose and revisit it. So, you know, it gets it's different.
Just because one purpose actually is not primary doesn't mean it's actually stopped. Right?
Exactly.
And so it is layered, and I appreciate that. And so this is what our conversation is going to be about, right? Moving into 2025, especially in the climate that we're moving in, that I feel like we would have regardless of who was elected in U.S. elections, but particularly because we do have this incoming administration and that's actually coming up, being able to talk about our purpose is absolutely important.
And how to maintain it.
Right. And I think also be able to talk about it from this very decolonial space, because LGBTQ folks, particularly Black trans women, are facing a prolific amount of danger that is not just hidden anymore, right? And so we've just had Trans Day of Remembrance, right? And this is Trans Awareness Month. And so, like, really being able to understand how important it is not to hide in these conversations, that pieces of our purpose is about who we are coming up in this lifetime as our best self, right? And how we're navigating these absolutely oppressive times.
And I think that with that being said, because I had wrote this down, because my mind was racing, and I thought to myself, even when we talk about wholeness and we talk about showing up, fully, sometimes with our authenticity, it can equal chaos. And I think that going into 2025, while we want to maintain our authenticity and while we want to move in that space of wholeness, we also want to keep in mind that we need to be prepared. Because it can equal you showing up as your full self, you being exactly who you want to be, will deter people and erupt people in a way that you have to protect yourself emotionally, spiritually, and sometimes even physically. But we lose sight because things aren't happening physically, that we'll let things happen to us emotionally and spiritually that are destroying us, and we don't recognize it because we're being authentic, but we're not recognizing how folks are also bringing us chaos due to our authenticity.
Something that actually came up for me too earlier last week was about sincerity and authenticity. And I think sincere authenticity.
That's such a good word, sincerity. It's such a good word. Yeah. Because it really is. It says everything without even saying it.
Right. Because people can be authentic, but they might not necessarily be sincere.
Exactly.
And so I can authentically show up, but what if I'm overextending my boundaries? Right.
What if I don't have the capacity?
Right. And so, like, what if I really don't have the emotional mental space to really be sincere? I'm going to give you what I'm here to give you. And also, sincerely, my ass would like to be in bed. Right.
Yep.
And so
we get on autopilot. Like, I'm authentic. Absolutely. It's me because I'm so used to being me.
Absolutely.
But it's autopilot. I'm not showing up fully.
Yes. And so one of the things that we always talk about in pieces of your purpose and like how we are preparing to move into 2025, we are going to talk about wholeness and the fact that we are already whole, but we are navigating a system that wants us to it serves them for us to feel disconnected from our wholeness, right? Being queer, LGBTQ, it doesn't mean you're fragmented. It means you're reconnecting yourself to your wholeness. And so, but the way things are we're socialized, that somehow we're not whole. Yep. And I think so that makes us talk about like healing and what is it to take care of ourselves in this very layered way. And then like how we show up in our relationships, our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others. And so when I've been, thinking about sincere authenticity, it is a certain level of discernment that I'm having that says I can be sincere, but I can also be discerning about which parts of me a person gets access to. And that allows me to be sincere. So when I am showing up, like you're getting the me that's not only true to myself,
but I'm in it.
But I'm in it. Embodied.
Exactly. You're embodying it. You're in it. You're
no
sitting
disassociation,
in it.
Right? Like I am present. And we talk about developing a presence practice, which actually probably should be like next month's shows. Like we're gonna get y'all prepped.
Right? And you want to know what's funny with you saying? I love how when we first met, one of the first things you said to me was, I can't remember what I was talking about, but I just remember you checking me real quick, and you were like, perfection does not exist. We don't do that here. You were like, perfection does not exist. We don't do that here. And when you just said what you said, is so beautiful because we think that because we have flaws, we are not whole. And we think that because society has told us that our flaws are flaws, that they are flaws, when they may indeed not be flaws. But because we've allowed society to tell us that for so long, we think that we can't reach wholeness because we're flawed. And the reality is, well, you can't say that perfection doesn't exist, but at the same time, I'm not whole. Well, perfection doesn't exist. Why are you not whole?
Right.
What are you waiting on? Because you can't wait for perfection because it's never going to come. That part. And you also can't internalize your flaws because you may not have even believed. And I'll use just a very simple example. I grew up my whole life thinking my nose was a flaw because I had a big nose, right? And now I love it because it reminds my mother of my grandfather. However, if I allowed people to continue to tell me there was a flaw, I would believe it. Right. You know what I mean? But I made a choice not to believe it because I found a light and a good space that I felt good in about my nose.
Yep.
But some people never reach there.
Yep.
Some people go their whole lives believing that they're flawed because someone said they were.
Yep, exactly. And so we're going to like reclaim our power, right? Like this space is about reclaiming our power and you lovingly, with compassion, reclaiming your power, your relationship to, you know, making decisions and acting on the decisions that you can make. And there's, because the perception is going to be that there's going to be these laws passed, right? We see like that moves into like what's going viral. And so what's going viral is like election. Peaches, we haven't talked about the language on here yet, but there may be a cuss word or two that actually comes out my damn mouth. And so talking about these damn elections, talking about these elections, right?
It's stressful.
It is.
It's stressful.
It absolutely is. And like how many folks are coming to us with election anxiety. And so, you know, you see what's happened with, you know, the bathroom ban with our Delaware senator who's moving to the White House, Sarah McBride, sorry, brain freeze. But the fact that this one woman is coming into the White House and there is this smoke screen about, you know, her using the bathroom. That's not because what that woman put biological female.
No, she put biological woman.
Well, yeah. So here that I ain't say it. I showed it. And so, you know, we have to talk about the fact that there's going to be perceptions of the restriction of movement for us. And so safely, how do we move?
But also, can we just really quickly spend 1 minute, maybe exactly 60 seconds? When you do something like that, right? I think that sometimes even, and this is for the folks, there may be some allies in here that don't fully understand the scope, you know, of being trans and what it means to be trans and how being trans affects cis women. Let me tell you something. How do you think, right? All right, so Sarah McBride is the first trans woman to come to Congress, right?
U.S. elected, and not Senator.
But Congress. She's the one in Congress, right? She's Congress elect, and she'll be going to the Capitol in January. Explain to me how she's the first, right? What happens when they suspect because of what? Let's say maybe a woman cannot have kids, or let's say a woman her appearance is not feminine enough. Let's say she's not wearing a skirt, right? What happens when they need to prove if you're a woman or not in order for you to use the bathroom? Who does that? Who decides that?
Exactly.
Who's going to implement that policy and make that a respectful, safe place? It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So, and women, cis women don't realize how that's going to trick. It starts here, but it doesn't end here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There was a Black woman last year who was killed by white supremacists because he believed that she was a trans woman.
And she was not.
And so anti-trans rhetoric does not help any of us, right? And so pieces of our purpose is, again, centering LGBTQ folks. And I know our particular focus is on Black sexuality, but all of us can learn from what Black folks have navigated. And so like being able to have these conversations, and because we are crisis therapists, we're not activating y'all. This is about how you take care of yourselves. So while we are going to highlight, right, these stories, this is also not for shock value, because I'm not trying to do that to your nervous system, right? This is all about regulation and how do we regulate ourselves in these dysregulated times, right? And so one of the things that we're actually going to do at the end of the show is always make sure that we give what we call our Shift 15. And these are going to be care practices that you can do to help yourself take care of yourself with regulation, because I'm a geek about healing and the science of healing. And so I'm going to bring that into this conversation. And y'all are going to always have very tangible practices that you can do every month that you can integrate into your care. You can take it to your counselor, your coach, your teacher, your husband, your spouse, your partner, your lover, your polycule, whoever the case may be, because we believe in healing as a lifestyle. And so when we think about pieces of our purpose, right, it is also about sustaining our ability to show up for our purpose. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do y'all have any questions?
Absolutely.
And thank you, NYMOR.
I'm not sure if we can actually see. I mean, I guess maybe if they would have put something, it would have shown. But I'm not sure of the functionality, actually. Of
well,
the
we're
comments.
still learning this. Yep, we're still learning this. So we will. I'm also going to go on the IME.
I wonder what people are doing already. ready that like without the care practice, without the guidance. I wonder how people themselves or what people are already doing in order to move forward, in order to not and yes, we're talking about wholeness, but I'm not even going to use that word right now. Just for people moving in 2025 to feel safe within themselves, if they have children, to feel safe sending their children out in the world. I wonder if it's anybody in here, because I would like to know, like, what are people doing? What are you know how like we tell our little black boys and little black girls, like, this may happen to you, this is what you do if it happens. I wonder, moving into this new administration, what conversations folks are having with themselves, their loved ones, and their friends.
That's a good question. You guys definitely are welcome to join the chat and to let us know. It will actually come up right here. And the one thing is safety planning. I think for Black folks, I saw this article, I want to say New York Times, that says that Black families have the talk about racial safety with their children at the age of 7. And so you think that's like first and second grade, right?
Yeah.
By second grade, right? And that for white families, they didn't have the talk, particularly with their boys, until they were actually 12 or 13 years old. And so we're talking about like, 6th and 7th grade, right? And so, yes, what are the conversations you're having? The holiday season is actually coming up. So stay tuned, because we're definitely going to give you some tips about how to navigate if you are dealing with family and you're going to see family, or even if you're not going to see family. And then join us actually for next month too, because we're family.
Okay.
And so spend some time with us. And we're going to talk about that. I think that is a good point. I do know what I am seeing is like people organizing, and I think they're organizing with, chosen family. I think also to pay attention to people who have already been organizing. So the fact that this is even happening, I say this, we have to be mindful of learned helplessness.
Ooh.
And so learned helplessness is what happens when we're in this trauma cycle, right? And the trauma cycle that the U.S. has its populace in is in the space of we can't do anything without the government.
And that's what they want us to believe.
Absolutely. And so, and I saw Dr. Joy DeGray, the guy who wrote the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and who has been talking about epigenetics and how trauma is passed from generation for generation. And she's been doing this work for decades. And so really being able to talk about how generationally, so I'm 51. So you would say my parents' generation kind of like dropped the ball, because, and even my generation, you think about the Spike Lee, kind of dropped the ball because we actually bought into the American dream instead of preparing for the fact that the dream has always been an illusion.
Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so I think going into preparing for that too is also remembering that organizers are around who's already been doing this work, and so are the elders who are around doing this work. And we see all the time about Ruby Bridges was 64, right? And my dad is, or even a little bit older, but my dad is 70. And so I remember my dad and my mom saying that they were first generation desegregation. And so I think it's really important to really remember that there are already like blueprints there. So don't think that we're starting all over, because we're not starting all over. We do have to be unlazy about planning
that part and making sure.
Or I would say intentional. I don't say lazy. We have to be intentional.
But I think lazy is a fair word too. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay. Because.
And this is tea, by the way.
Yeah. Because even myself included, find myself sometimes having to give myself the talk. Yeah. Like, I'll use a perfect example. I follow Hope Giselle on Instagram. I love Hope Giselle, and Hope Giselle currently is talking about organizing. And I had a thought for a second to myself, out of laziness, because I'm like, I already got so much going on. My first thought was, but she's all the way in DC. But then I had to challenge that thought, and I said, but you know what? DC is only an hour and 25 minutes from you. And if you can go and stand up for your brothers and sisters and whoever, and it only takes an hour and 20 minutes, why would you not practice what you preach? You're always doing it. So sometimes it is laziness, because sometimes we already have our life set up in a way where anything that's out of our comfort zone, anything that's going to bring us a little stress, we're like, I don't want to put that much thought into it. In reality, if you don't, like you just said, we're not helpless. Learned helplessness is what will have you convincing yourself that it's too far, and nothing's going to happen if I do go, and nothing's going to change if I do go. And that's just not the truth.
Right. I appreciate that. I also think too, the other part that you also brought in there too, is that if you have the capacity, which is different from a like unintentional effort,
yes,
right, which is like I don't have the emotional or mental space to actually show up, and so what's actually safe, and so if you don't have the emotional mental space, then most likely you won't even have it won't even be safe to drive.
Washington
Niaja
DC
asks where was
sister. Washington DC, but it's going to be, once she gets everything together, you know, it's going to be flyers and stuff. But I'm just like, I had inboxed her. She inboxed me back. And I was shocked. Yeah, she inboxed me back and I was shocked. And she was like, you know, stay tuned. But right now she wants to send her trans folk because there is, you know, some folks in the community that are not always all for what we're all for. The same way we say all skin folk and it transfers. So I understand her wanting to protect, you know, because you can't announce all your movements. Because then the government does.
I think that's the other thing too, right? Like social media is now social surveillance, right? And we have to be mindful when they talk about the revolution not being televised. Like I still think it's going to happen on social media, right? And like it can't be televised, right? It has to be. Sometimes I'm like, if you're not in the know, that's probably for a reason. But that doesn't mean that you cannot put yourself in a position to know who's still organizing out loud. I think there's definitely some organizing spaces that should remain silent for the safety of everyone. And, you know, the other thing I think is going viral is these appointments. You know, first we have to worry about whether or not we're going to have veteran health care, whether or not we're going to have the Department of Education or Head Start and lunch, whether we're going to have Medicare and Medicaid. And so like there are these spaces that are actually showing up that like they're organizing. And so what we have to do is organize. We can't respond. That learned helplessness is I can't do anything until I know what the other person is doing. It's like, why?
And I'm sitting here thinking like, and during a time like this, right, where we're going into 2025, we're going into this new administration and we're talking about healing and wholeness. For us as therapists and sexologists and just in our clinical lives and our personal lives, for us, we know mostly, you know, what we're getting ourselves into, you know, when it comes to our person. We know what we're getting ourselves into, but I wonder, like, what about the people who are, and we're all, you know, healing is it's a lifetime. It takes a lifetime. But I wonder for folks who are like in the beginning of their healing phase, how do you heal while simultaneously try to speak truth to power and fight when you're so passionate, right? Like, how do you maintain that healing, but also move forward in what you're doing? It's like, how can I show up for myself, show up for the people around me, make sure that I'm being authentic, make sure that I'm being whole, but then at the same time, go out and fight? You know what I mean? Go out and organize. It's not easy.
Or should it be possible? And so I think all that is a lot, right? I think that's the part about discernment. So what I hear is, first, you already know, when I think about discernment, I think about three things: desirability, capacity, and capability, right? Because I was there 4 years ago, right? Like trying to show up in all these places, but I wasn't discerning about how I could show up or what I had the capacity for. And so I think for that, it is always about, you know, one, I have desire. I want to, all right, check, right? That's consent 101 is desire. But capacity, again, what's the emotional and mental space? So to me, if we're not centering our healing and looking at healing as a lifestyle, and so I always ask folks, like, how are you taking care of yourself? And then they'll be like, well, you know, I go to the gym, or, you know, I listen to music.
I read, I meditate.
And I'm like, okay, hold on, let me ask the question differently. How are you taking care of your spirit? And then they'd be like,
huh? Then they do that. They be stuck. They be lost. They be like, what?
And if you don't do this, the spirituality thing, how you taking care of your energy?
Yep. How you taking care of your
Because
energy?
now you're looking at the relationship between what you do and intention. And so when you're saying like, well, how do I be in my healing? Well, your healing is an embodiment. And so everything that you're doing is for the purpose and intention of taking care of your spirit. Therefore, that's your center. Like that's where you start.
But that's also the disconnect, because when you ask a person, how are you taking care of yourself? And they immediately go to, oh, I'm reading, I'm meditating, I'm exercising. Yes, you're doing all those things, and you're doing all those things kind of on autopilot. But right, while you're doing all those things, it's like, well, are you, like you said, intention? What process, what's happening, what are you processing while you're doing? Because you're doing them for your body, and you think that by doing them, yes, absolutely, it does help. It helps with regulation and stress and all that, but you're doing meditation and exercise, all that for your body. But how are you intentionally integrating that with your spirit?
And I think that goes back to what we talk about with the show is wholeness. And so redefining wholeness, right? Colonized somatics will have you believe that your wholeness is only your relationship to your body. Decolonized somatics, right? Going to our ancestral practices will have you understanding that you're mind, body, spirit, and energy. And so when we're holding space for ourselves and for others, it is about calling in your awareness to mind, body, and spirit energy. And with that presence practice, right now you can say, how can I, with what I have to be capable of, right? Like the ability to do, how am I going to show up in these relationships?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, especially if you, and not to mention, like if you're living with some type of chronic disability, right? You may not have the mobility to move around to go to DC.
Yeah.
And so it is, what can you do within the space with the capacity, the mental, emotional space, and the ability that you actually have. And I think so. One, y'all, stop putting so much damn pressure on yourself, because everybody has a part to play. And so with curiosity and compassion, figure out yours.
Yeah. Figure out what comes to you. Like I always tell people, like, figure out what comes to you like naturally, and then lean on that, and then allow it to evolve. Absolutely. Like if it comes naturally to you to talk to people, then maybe that's where you start. Absolutely. Just making sure that every opportunity that you get, and I do just to backtrack a little bit and put something even simpler. Back to what you said about intention. I had asked somebody before, and we were having a conversation about regulating. And I said, well, are you running to lose weight, or are you running to release anger? Are you running to lose weight, or are you running to remove stress? Like that's when you're talking about intention, because if you're running just like, oh, I'm running, I got to burn these calories, I got to lose the weight, you're not focusing, you're not centering. You have to, during that process, you have to center yourself and why am I doing this? Yeah. What am I doing? Because like we talk about, a lot of people don't know, you can feel your energy shift, and not only can you feel it, you can control it. Absolutely. You can control your energy shifting throughout your body, and our movements do help, but you have to have that intention in order for your spirit and body, for everything to align. So for people who just like, I'm aware, that's great, but you have no intention. Your awareness is nothing without your intention. Awareness doesn't equal practice. Oh, absolutely. I know many things. I'm not. And so when people talk about finding like their purpose, I'm like, your purpose is to be your best self. Stop thinking about capitalism and colonialism that says, like, I'm supposed to, like, you're trying to figure out where you are. Legacy. You're trying to think, and I have to be the grand. Right. Or you're trying to find your purpose in a spectrum of labor. Yep. Where you gonna be working for? Where you gonna be laboring for the rest of your life? And I'm like, you're more than your labor. You're more than your labor. And so, and I think that also too, if we can shift just a little bit, because this also talks about like how we show up in our lovership. Right. And for me, lovership is exactly that. Like, how am I showing up in relationship to myself and others, right? From that place of love. And I like bell hooks. I haven't read all. I love, but All About Love, right? And I like the M. Scott Peck's definition that she uses. That he says, love is the ability to lift oneself lift oneself's own or another's spiritual growth. And so what to me it is like, we're regulating together, right? Like love is from this place of like, do I feel desirable, right? Am I getting reciprocity? Do a little Audre Lorde, right? Am I getting like reciprocity? Am I getting what I'm giving, right? And so
all of this stuff about taking care of yourself and you want to do the advocacy and things of that nature, you have to take care of yourself in your home. Can you advocate in your home?
Mhm.
Right? Can you take care of your home? Like, can you have stability in your home? If your home is not a place of safety where you can have stability, wherever that chosen home is for you,
Mhm.
right? So I think going back to what we said, like, how are people preparing for this new administration? I think we should continue to talk about, like, what does a safety plan actually look like,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And not from this place of active or passive, unalive ideations, but from this place of like regulating any anxiety that you have and how that will show up in your decision making.
Mhm.
And so, what does safety actually look like in body? What does safety actually look like in your lovership? What does safety look like so that way you still have access to pleasure, both sexually and not sexually?
And making sure that when we talk about safety overall, like, are you considering your safety when you're making the decisions? Like, because we all know how we like to feel safe, right?
Yes.
But how often, even myself included, I'm guilty of it. I grew up in an area where, for me, it's like, counselor or not, no how much time go on, I'm from the hood. And so, like, it ain't too much I'm scared of. It's not too much that I'm afraid of. It just don't work that way for me.
Right.
And so, but I have to remind myself that while you may not be fearful, it does not mean that there's no danger. And so I have to be mindful of that, and I have to check myself sometimes and be like, okay, well, safety plan. What are you thinking just in case? Yes, you can handle yourself, but what if just this instance is too much for you to handle? How are you going to make sure that you get back to safety, be it emotionally, spiritually, or physically?
Absolutely. Yup. And yup. That was beautiful. And so, but I do want to, moving into this new part of life and ourselves and like our lovership, like you have to be able to know, like, how do you show up as a lover? And again, lover is not always about for the act of sexual pleasure, right?
Mhm.
It's just for the love and enjoyment and pleasure of life, right? The appreciation of it. And that's important because there's going to be so much. Oh, especially if you voted for, if you are with someone who didn't vote, who voted for not your candidate.
How does that work though? But how does that work?
Well, I've supported relationships where folks are like, their relationship is apolitical.
But is it like, when you say that, right? I get it, but
then
is it like no core values? Is it like we just support who we support and it's not based in any? Because if it's based in any core values, wouldn't a little part of you still be somewhat offended?
Well, core values go all the way out the way when you don't want to be alone.
Facts. Oh, yeah, you hit that one on the nail. You hit that one on the nail. Yes, they do. No, because it's a real thing. Let's talk about it. It's a real thing. Loneliness is an epidemic, and nobody wants to experience it.
Loneliness is an epidemic, right? Like, inflation has made everything unlivable.
Yes.
And so we don't even have the freedom to like move around the way we really want
to even be focused so deeply on the core values against your partner to let that cause friction between who your candidates are. You're right.
Because we live in a capitalist system that, and this is the other thing I say too, right? Like, how do we navigate spaces in a system that is designed for our perpetual exhaustion?
Yeah.
Right. And I think about the conversation between James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni, right?
James Baldwin,
and so when he and Nikki Giovanni were talking, and she was like, you go everywhere, you smile for the white man, right? You smile for people, but when you get home, I get the worst of you. She was like, smile for me. And he's like, I can't.
I'm white.
Right, he's white. Right. There's no energy left.
There's none left.
And so I cannot show up in the relationship that's most dear to me. Right.
It's just like code switching at work. It's just like having a code switch. And then when you get people, the worst thing I never understood growing up, you sit in an office all day, you sit in a seat all day. Okay. And you don't know what energy I'm expending all day. You don't know if I'm cold, especially anybody that know me knows I've always had corporate jobs, so I've always had the code switch. And so code switching from 8 to 5, baby, it gets tiresome.
I don't think you can see it.
Is it gone?
I can see it. Yeah.
It gets tiresome. And I'm just like, for me, I can imagine. You know, I can imagine like you doing this, you're pretending, and not even necessarily pretending, but you're putting forth this self that you know you have to put forth that's not really you. It's just a tiny little fragment of what you created to fit into the space. And you're forcing that fragment into a giant piece all day long. So of course, by the time you get home, it comes crumbling apart every day.
Well, we talk about masking, right? And so code switching is a mask, right? Not just from a
representative,
right? Absolutely, right. And so, like, I support high school students as well. You know, I always ask them, like, do you know what code switching is? And like, they don't. And I was like, go ask a Black teacher what code switching is. I bet you they're doing it right now, right? And it is about policing our behavior so that way we appear non-threatening in corporate, i.e. white spaces. And so, you know, the fact that there is always, and again, people really, really forget that we are on stolen land, and the North America or U.S. has prospered from enslaved labor, right? And so when you think about the fact that the reason why reparations will never, and I promise you, it has to be given from a local, but it will never be given from a government perspective, is because then they would have to acknowledge the emotional labor, right? The emotional
and how
labor.
It's carried over.
Not just the physical labor, but the emotional labor that Black folks have carried, particularly Black women have carried, right? They expected that when the emotional labor of Black women, when, you know, Kamala, right? They expect, and so to put a cost on that labor is something that's always been devalued. And so, but we have to really call into that labor to say there is an invisible labor that every last one of us is expending, and we have to be able to name it, because that is what's contributing to our inability to show up to have great sex, to have great relationships, to have great loverships, to be able to communicate with each other, right? To be able to watch a movie and not fall asleep, right? Like
to be able to sit at a restaurant and actually talk to one another. You know how many couples I go out and see them sitting together for an hour and 15 minutes and they don't say 2 words to each other and they're scrolling on their phone. And I'm like, and you know, it can be unfair because I don't know what's going on. They both could have just had a long day, but I see it so much so that I know that there is something there. There's something there, and it's like, what is happening to the love? What is happening to the communion? What's happening to the fellowship of the relationship?
Yep. The fellowship of the relationship. And that is, I feel like, I don't know if it was a lost art, but it's just not a practice art.
Yeah.
Because I think this other thing that we don't see enough of on purpose is successful relationships, right? And that successful relationships take a type of intentionality. And so I like
a lot of intentionality.
Right? And so when you know, you're supporting, when you're in a relationship and you don't want to be intentional about joining and appreciation and, you know, really not just like, how was your day, right? But what made you happy? What frustrated you today?
Did anything surprise you? Did you experience anything new? Did you see something that caught your eye?
What
and people look at me, believe it or not, when I'm dating, when I'm navigating the dating space and I'm talking to folks, these are the type of questions that I ask, and I always get looked at like I got 4 heads. Like when I ask questions like that, like, did anything surprise you today? Did anything catch you off guard? Like just anything at all, because you never know how that'll spark an interesting conversation. You ever met a couple and like they've been together for years, and you're with somebody else and you're talking and they share something and the other partner's like, oh, I didn't know that about you. Y'all been together 10 years. What do you mean? No, really? Think about it. Y'all been together 10 years. What do you mean you didn't know this about them? And it's not even like some grand thing that would be a big secret, which tells you, are they really talking?
Right. Because again, it's perpetual exhaustion. So do you have the energy for conversation? There was this one comment that I made on a journalist, Paul Bronson, and he was interviewing Gabor, which is the somatic experiencing guy. And it was when that research article that came out that says women suffer from autoimmune disease the most, because they are not communicating
Yep.
their
I saw that.
right. And so and I'm familiar with both of their work, right? And I, you know, somatic experiencing, to me, I recognize where it's coming from, and also they're repackaging stuff that they made illegal for us, like our healing arts. But anyway, so here was my point. And at this point, 906 people agree with me. I said, are women not talking about it, or are partners not practiced nor skilled to compassionately listen, regulate, and hold space without violence, guilting, shaming, or avoidance? So that way the point of expression, I said, wait, and hold space. Oh, yeah. Without. Anyway, could they do that without holding space? I said, is it not simply that women aren't talking, but are people listening? And so you can take the gender out of all of it, right? It is, are you safe enough for someone to have a conversation with you?
Yeah, because I feel like saying women are not talking is a scapegoat out of this world. Because you could turn on any television show and you will see that women are talking, and you will see that no matter what they say, the man is frustrated or whatever the case may be. And then so he kind of closes off what it is that you're saying. So he's not even listening at this point. He's listening to tell you to be quiet, or he's listening to tell you he's tired of the case may be, but he's not listening to respond. He's not listening to be able to give you his undivided attention. And like you said, curate the space so that it's safe, so that do you know how many times I've been on, and I don't even want to call it a double date, the third wheel. You know how many times I've been the third wheel, and I've been around a couple, and the man will say something and I'll watch the woman shrink. And vice versa. Or the woman will say something and I'll watch the man shrink because company's around. And when someone does that, that lets me know they don't feel safe enough to continue, because they can't predict what you may say in front of me. And that worries me, because it's like, if you guys are a couple, if you all are a couple, and you can't even, and there's a friend in presence, and you have to shrink in order to stop the conversation from proceeding, to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because women are talking. Women are talking. The men just aren't listening.
And I appreciate what I feel like. My husband and I are always ask these questions. Communication is key. And I appreciate you sharing it. Absolutely, positively. There was another post where a lady asked her guy best friend, say, pay attention to your response the next time a lady says something to you. And she says, what I want you to pay attention to is, do you immediately want to say something back? Do you feel like you can actually listen?
Do you want to process it?
Do you want to argue? And so what he found was, and he started asking his homeboys this, was like, they're actually socialized to not listen.
Yep.
Right? To not listen.
Because women are known, the status quo is that women complain. So it's like, if you're gonna, even with my own mother, like I have to catch myself sometimes. She'll be venting or just talking about something, and I'll be like, even me, I've been guilty of it, and I'll be like, Mom, why are you complaining? And she'll be like, I'm not complaining, I'm just venting. And then I have to think about what she was saying, and she wasn't complaining. She wasn't. But as a man, because I'm still a man, I've been taught that when women start to critique or say anything that is against what is going on, it's complaining. And that's not the case. So now that's something that I had to also unlearn.
And so that's what we're seeing in relationships, is like, we talk about loverships. And so when you think about like what your capacity is, right, you have to think about like, also, what have I been socialized to respond?
Yes.
Right. To respond. And how is that showing up and preventing intimacy in my relationship? Right. We're not even going to talk about how genders have sex. That's a conversation we're going to table, because
for another time.
First of all, can I sex is not just penetrative. That you can have sex without touching. I ain't gonna say no more. Google it. But no, it's like, for real, you can have sex without touching. And people are just like, huh? Because sex is energy, right? And so I think just being able to, when we think about capacity and lovership and this election, like, we're going to see how the dots connect. And I've often told people, like, pay attention and connect the dots. if you don't unlearn the rush of capitalism, you're going to literally wake up and be like, where did time go?
Yep.
Where did time go?
And if you don't learn how to spot it, if you don't learn how to identify it, like if you don't know what capitalism looks like, it blows my mind when I'm in the workspace and there are things, and I'll give you a perfect example of capitalism right now. Having a meeting, and as soon as someone actually speaks up, everyone jumps on them like you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Having a meeting, and as soon as someone has something to say that does not align and does not go with what is the purpose of the meeting, if when someone is going to bring something up, the whole point is the meeting of the minds so that we can discuss whatever is on the agenda. And if I don't agree with something, the moment that I don't agree, everybody jumps on the defense and it's like, oh, that's capitalism. Because we've been taught to pretend that we're giving you a voice, but you really don't have one. So we're going to throw a meeting. We're going to have an itinerary. We're going to have an agenda. But the moment you speak up against it, you're getting the boot or you're getting ostracized. That is capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Because capitalism is about policing people's behavior to their value, right?
Yeah.
And so, one thing I always, when we talk about pieces of your purpose, like remember that you are more than your labor and that there is no amount of worth that people can pay in time, energy, or anything else that is going to give you what you're worth, right? It's like you have to see yourself more than what you can do for others, because acts of service is my love language. Is it, or are you overcompensating because you don't feel like you have any value unless you're actually doing something for somebody? Because capitalism has told us what? To be busy, which is why I love the NAP ministry and Tricia Hersey's work. Like, y'all need to learn how to rest. People don't know how to rest.
I hope and pray that Ivy is still on here. This is one of my friends too. I know her. Because what you just said, I know if she's on here, hit her. One of the first things she said to me when I met her, literally almost identical to what you just said 10 seconds ago. When she said, and she calls me Bree, she said, and we were talking about career, we were talking about purpose, all of that. And she said, Bree, and this was the first time I was maybe 24 years old at the time. And she was like, you know what you have to understand? And if you met her, I never expected this from her in a million years because she's so funny. We always laughing and joking. And she said, you know what you need to understand? And I said, what? Being funny. Like, what you about to tell me? And she said, and I'll never forget it. She said, you have to be able to look in the mirror and you have to be able to be okay with what you see, okay with what you're putting up with, okay with what you're allowing in your life. She said, if you look in the mirror, she said, it might be nothing for somebody else. She said, but you might look in the mirror and it might be everything for you. Yeah. And she said, so if you look in the mirror and you're okay with what you see, she said, that's what's important. And I'll never forget it because, like I said, we get so caught up sometimes in what we believe things should be or how they should be that we forget that we have to be okay with what we see when we look in the mirror, what we identify when we look at ourselves. Yes. And most of us don't do that. Yes. Most of us can't even sit alone for 5 minutes by ourselves, let alone take a long look in the mirror and identify what you see. Mm-hmm. And not what you see as soon as you look in the mirror, but stand there and stare just for a little bit and let your mind wander and see what your ancestors bring up for you while you're looking in that mirror.
Spirit. Absolutely, positively. And I think that's a really good segue into like the shift 15 of like providing tips so that way you don't crash out.
Exactly.
Right. So that way you have capacity to show up in your relationships and the loverships that you want. And so pieces of your purpose, right? We're going to center ourselves in our conversations. And so there's a lot of places where you can go and to hear about the commentary, or, you can follow your timeline about, what's actually going on the other side. We're going to focus what's going on this side. And so like, help me understand pieces of your purpose is really about that. Like, we want to do some education. We want to do some funny, right? And we want to do some entertainment, but we want us to sustain ourselves, right? Because this is literally the long haul. Like, we're here. Not everybody has the privilege to get up to move to a different state, let alone a different country.
Okay. I don't, and I wish I did.
And some of us are choosing, if we have the capability to stay, because our loved ones are here, because this fight is our fight, right? And so being able to take care of ourselves and what I call like self-liberation is important, because healing is individually defined, but it's community supported. We don't heal by ourselves.
You can't.
And so the science of healing is literally self-regulation, intuition, and co-regulation, which means I have to know myself, I have to know my intuition, and I have to be able to be discerning about how much I am in relationship with other people, because you're around people who are activating you, and it's time to
and
let
you need
go.
it though. You need to be challenged sometimes in order to know.
Absolutely. The butterfly has to struggle to get out of the chrysalis, right? And so, but you still have to be discerning about the relationships you still engage in, right? Like, don't do some self-depreciation, suffering shit. Like, we get to a place,
especially with your lover shit.
Listen, because self-accountability is something. Again, I recognize there's lots of people who can't leave, right? But that and that doesn't mean, because there's no buts, and
maybe you can't leave physically, but what does it look like to develop a regimen of leaving sometimes mentally to protect yourself?
Right, absolutely.
You know, you're in a situation, but you're not in the situation.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. We will definitely be talking about abuse of power, because we're going to see that a lot. And I really want people to look at understanding their relationship to power, right? Again, the ability to make decisions and the ability to act with decisions you make. Look up the power, I think it's power and control wheel. I think if you Google that, like, you'll see exactly what we'll be talking about. So let's give some tips so people can not crash out. So one personal and one professional.
I'm gonna start off with a personal, only because this past 2-3 weeks has been stressful for me. And on a personal note, there is one thing that I have been doing that has really worked for me. I've been self-soothing, and I'm gonna be specific about how I've been doing it. In the past, I was self-soothed by doing, like, you know, a nighttime like oil diffuser regimen and all of that. But lately, and this is gonna be so funny, I have been seriously. So I am, a little fun fact about me is that I love musicals. And so I love musicals because I remember being a kid and I used to love to sing and hear people singing, but specifically, I love things that feel magical. And musicals have always felt magical to me. So I find myself in latter days, I find myself going back to that because I find it more overpowering than the stress that I'm going through. So when I am really stressed out lately, I've been watching, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I've been watching Cheetah Girls, High School Musical, Brandy, Cinderella, Dream Girls, Burlesque, because it reminds me that even if I don't feel okay right now, there was a time that I was okay, and I will get back to being okay. And so it helps me self-soothe, and that's what I've been doing personally to really push through those stresses and anxieties.
That actually brings up to me, and they're not actually giving me to promote this, but the Delaware Art Museum in Wilmington is actually hosting like a jazz art night, and they're actually going to have a local jazz artist, award-winning jazz artist, Maya Valero, and she's going to be singing her new album, Better Days. And so I think about, like, it's important to, like, find spaces in the community that has that, and that really showed up for me. So I'm glad you're doing that. I like music. That's good.
I love
That's good to know about you.
Because it's a little corny, so I always want people to know. It's a little bit corny.
I'll give my corny too, because mine has been, like, helping me the last 3 years. So when I first came here to Delaware, my dad was retired military, Delaware Air Force Base. Channel 29's news, like, literally, there was not really cable in Kent County, and so literally we had a black and white TV, which had a little like a hanger on the antenna and stuff. So on Sundays we would always watch kung fu movies.
Oh.
And so, listen, I'm a Bruce Lee fan.
My mom is too.
Really?
Oh yes, she loves Bruce Lee.
Be like water. Like, so listen. So I like Asian entertainment, and so, you know, my brother was Dragon Ball Z, so I love anime.
Come on, brother. Yes.
So I love anime, and no lie, in the last 3 years I got into K-drama. First of all, but now honestly, it's Thai boy love dramas. We have to go to Thailand.
Oh yeah, I would love that.
Okay,
I would love that. Yes.
Thai boy love dramas. Listen,
yes,
the passion, I can't take the acting serious, but
yes,
the storyline is so good.
There.
Oh, and also, like, Chinese historical, like, Netflix has this one I'm watching right now, the story of the Pearl Girl. So I absolutely personally. So I think also to reconnect to something that brings you joy. And so
Yes.
whether it's watching TV or activity, actually,
And
I'm
joy
getting ready to
that
start
can't be
sprinting.
measured.
I'm getting
Joy that can't be measured.
Yes.
Like
yes.
I say that because like when I say it overwhelms, joy that can't be measured can surpass anything.
Listen.
Joy that like it's unending. Like it's unending for me when those nostalgic things come into play.
It's necessary. And for me, when I think about healing the erotic, joy is it's one of the uses of the erotic, right? Like tapping into things that bring you joy. And so when people are in this place of I can't move past it, then the intentionality is what can you connect to that brings you joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say one of those tips is identify like 2 to 3 things that bring you joy. And if you have to use your senses to do that, use your senses to do that, right? Like, but tap into something that brings you joy. And so that would be one of my things. And even if you do that, science says 15 minutes a day helps create, and over 66 days helps create a regulated nervous system. And so my thing is like, give yourself 15 minutes a day or at least several times a week to tap into something that brings you joy. And so I absolutely love that one. And make it as corny as it needs to be, like, because it's corny is about other people's perceptions, not yours. And so it's not corny to you.
And it's for you.
And it's for you.
It's for you.
Right?
So
this
it
is also
be corny.
Right. Now, there's sometimes something that you will share with others, and then you have to also know when not to share.
Yeah.
Like, this is mine.
Yeah.
This is mine.
Because you're protecting it. And as long as you don't share it and you protect it, it cultivates and it evolves with you and it stays with you.
Yeah. I can't wait. So next month, every third Sunday, I believe, I'm starting my Shift Somatic Healing Circles. And that's one of the things I'm actually going to talk about. And it's going to be right here in Middletown, Delaware. And I'm going to walk people through meditation and movement and really how to like transmute energy, because I'm an energy worker and we're going to do that. So the other thing, let's see, professionally, what can you do to take care of yourself? Honestly, the practice of detachment. I think sometimes we get so gung-ho in who we are and what we do professionally that becomes our identity. And you have to remember that you are more than what you do. And so practicing a level of emotional detachment from your work and how you show up. I'm not saying silent quit, or I'm just saying like, be mindful of your energy, right? And focus on your perception and not other people's perception. And so practicing detachment will look like everybody wants to see you. People don't value what you say, right? Or they think you are the know-it-all. I think I think that part is important to remember, is like you have to understand like how you actually show up in your space, and that's what's important. And so practice a level of detachment. What does that look like? Red, yellow, green. Check in with yourself. Green is even if you're not okay, you're managing. Yellow is I'm struggling to manage and I need to exit stage left for 10 minutes. I gotta check out for a minute to come back. And red is knowing when you need to take a damn mental health day. Take it. PTO or not, take it. Because you cannot value something more than peace. You can't value something more than your peace. And so practice discernment, practice detachment with discernment. And so like, yeah, those will be my Shift 15, because it's about shift. It's an embodiment practice, how to get you from a place of struggling to struggling less. So you're not struggling at all, right? And that's really, some of what we're going to be doing, like wholeness, healing, wellness with some practical, actionable advice, conversation, funnies.
And our hope, our goal is to, all become like a family. Like eventually the goal is to, when we log on, we're having a conversation. Folks are commenting. We got a few today, but hopefully like folks are really commenting, so we can know not just from our perspective, but from everyone else. Like, all right, what is going on?
Absolutely.
What needs to be discussed? What tips and tools do folks need? Because we will only know from engagement.
Yes. And so if you are struggling with mental health support, if you're struggling with your own mental health, make sure you can text 988. That is the crisis hotline. You can go to journeywellnessdelaware.com. You can also go to imecorp.org that has a list of supports for LGBTQ folks in Delaware. And if you are beyond the state of Delaware, send us a message and we will put you in the right places and spaces. Also look at organizations like BEAM, Loveland Foundation for mental health support and vouchers, the Boris L. Henson Foundation for mental health support and vouchers, and clinicians of color. And so we want to make sure that, you know, as a community, we are taking care of ourselves and each other. Thanking IME Inc. for allowing this and creating this space. And I think we can go ahead and close right here. Is this a good place?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
So I am Queen.
And I am Counselor Charlie.
Thank you for joining us. Make sure you go ahead and leave comments because, like I said, even if you are watching the afterplay, we will go ahead and keep up with the comments. If you have any topic suggestions, please make sure you also send us a message as well. We would love to know what we can help you understand more and how we can help you understand more about pieces of your purpose.
You can find me on Instagram at Counselor Charlie, just Counselor Charlie, no E on Charlie, or on TikTok, Counselor Charlie. Because that's where, because I don't have Facebook. You have Facebook? Yeah, I will have a Facebook soon though, and that'll be Counselor Charlie too. So all social media, just look up Counselor Charlie, and that's how you'll find me with no E on the Charlie.
And you can find me at sistersexologist.com, sister, SISTA, because my Blackness is everything. So sistersexologist.com and on the social media handles. And if you are ready to dive into your healing, you can go to Lena Queen, LenaQueen.com for downloadable guided meditations and ebooks that will help support your healing and your lovership. Until next time,
everybody have a great evening.
Take care of yourself.